Welcome to Unit 3 review for the test. Federalism is set up by the 10th Amendment, and it says that any power not delegated to the national government or denied to the states is reserved for the states. So on the left-hand side of this Venn diagram, you have your delegated powers that are given to the national government, like declaring war and maintaining the armed forces. On the right-hand side, you have the reserved powers that are given to the states, like making marriage laws or providing for public safety. And then in the middle, you have your concurrent powers, and those are your shared powers, like levying taxes and borrowing money. Other things having to do with federalism, grants and aid, that's money that's going to be given from a higher level to a lower level of government with no expectation of repayment. Two types: block grants, those are favored by the states because it's just a chunk of money and they can decide who is going to get the money, how it's going to be spent, what are their goals and objectives. These are favored more by conservatives because it's smaller government, with the federal government not being as micromanaging with that money as it would be in a categorical grant. And categorical grants are favored by liberals. Liberals like big government, and categorical grants with the strings attached would represent bigger government. They're not favored by the states, however, because they really weaken the power of the government and the state legislatures because they aren't able to determine as much of how that money is going to be spent. All right, so horizontal federalism, that's your relationship between the states. So we're talking interstate compacts, full faith and credit clause, privileges and immunities clause. Vertical federalism, that is your relationship between the national government and the states. And things have to do with those two things are devolution and the supremacy clause. And devolution is really just kind of passing the buck from one level of a higher level of government to a lower level of government. And the supporters of devolution really like it because it gives states and local governments more discretion in the use of federal funds, and it makes the national government smaller. The problem is sometimes when the national government gives the states a responsibility or the state gives like the county a responsibility, they don't provide any funding with it, and then they can't do it, and the states are hamstrung or the counties are hamstrung. All right, when it comes to talking about the federal government, two things. The Interstate Commerce Clause has greatly expanded the power of the federal government. We saw that in starting in Gibbons versus Ogden. However, we saw a pushback in U.S. v. Lopez when the Commerce Clause was used to argue for federally established gun-free zones, and clearly the court did not agree with that. The Necessary and Proper Clause, also known as the Elastic Clause, gives the federal government the ability to use their implied powers to carry out their enumerated powers. And this really makes the Constitution flexible and viable and the ability to remain relevant. The founding fathers wanted to leave voting eligibility up to the states. So not only does who is eligible left up to the states, but in more recent times, it has set up with voting times. Like, so for example, our polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., or some states are open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., or some states have expanded voting. Some states have, you can do absentee balloting. There's lots of different circumstances in different states, and that the founding fathers did that on purpose. State sovereignty in the Articles, the fact that we had a confederal system under the Articles did not work, so we changed to that dual sovereignty of the federal system that we have now, although obviously with the national government remaining the supreme force in that relationship. A representative republic was chosen by the founding fathers because A, it mitigates the factions, and B, it allows us to have fewer people that are weighing in on those bills. And you might argue that, that does take the power away from the minority sometimes when their voices aren't being heard. However, if we had direct democracy where everybody had to be, voting and doing all that stuff, it clearly wouldn't work. And then the amendment process that's set up in Article 5, if you look at this chart, the national government can be involved, but the states have to be involved. And so the national government, the amendment, for example, could be proposed by 2/3 vote of each house in the Congress. And then there's two things that could happen. It could go to the states, and the 3/4 of the state legislatures could ratify it, or it could be ratified by 3/4 of state conventions. The other way to start that is it could be proposed by a national convention called by Congress at the request of 2/3 of the state legislatures. and then it could go and be ratified by 3/4 of the states or by 3/4 of state conventions. So miscellaneous terms, initiative. This was a progressive era reform that wanted to increase the democracy in our country by giving people more of a voice. And for example, if citizens were to circulate a petition to legalize recreational use of marijuana in a state that doesn't already have that, that would be an example of direct democracy as well as initiative. Fiscal conservatives and social conservatives are both factions of the modern day Republicans. The fiscal conservatives are concerned more about spending and and reining in the spending that is happening by the national government, and they're worried about budget deficits, whereas social conservatives are focused on cultural issues. But again, both factions of modern day Republicans. The party platform summarizes the goals of the party, and this is finalized at the National Convention. And then the planks in that platform could be, for example, gay marriage, the debt ceiling, abortion, immigration, all those types of things. Caucus can have two meanings. It's an organization of congressional representatives that promotes a cause common to them. If you remember back when Donna Lupardo was here, she talked about the fact that she heads up the Women's Caucus on the state level. But there are caucuses on the federal level as well. And then it could also have another meaning of a process through which voters determine who will win a state's delegates at the National Convention. And that would be mirroring the primary process that we're about to be approaching. All right, some more miscellaneous terms. Internal efficacy is the feeling like you can make a difference in influencing the political system. It responds to people like you. External efficacy is that government has that effect on you. Proportional representation. So let's say that there is a 60-40% split between the voters. So 60% Republicans, 40% Democrat were voted in. That means that 60% of the seats would be awarded to the Republicans and 40% would be awarded to the Democrats versus the winner-take-all system that we have now. Voter turnout can be influenced by lots of different things. You could have the fact that the voting age was changed to 18 for the 26th Amendment, the fact that states allow individuals to register when they apply for a new driver's license, which is the motor voter law, the fact that you can do absentee balloting, get out the vote drives by grassroots organizations like MTV or a local organization. Interest groups work for the benefits of its members. So, for an example, the Sierra Club would be working for the benefit of its members when having to do with environmental conservation, for example. So they might want to get, some land put on the Federal Registry as a national wildlife preserve, or members of AARP might be clamoring for cheaper prescription drugs, and so AARP would lobby on behalf of them. All right, hope you found this helpful.